I remember when we started to think about the SET award, it was before Paris, actually, kind of, or around that time. And then everybody was celebrating. In the same year, we also had the situation that the SDGs were passed by the leaders of the world. So that was really an inspiring year, I must say. And then it was Marrakesh. Donald Trump came to office. Then it was Bonn. That was, of course, great with the COP, because it was Germany. We had Katowice, and well, now everybody's asking, well, what is the process all about? I mean, was Paris just a single issue, or is there really something going on? That is something what I want to discuss with you later on, of course. We're talking about innovation. When we talk about the planet, we talk about politics. We have to talk about us, I guess, because if you see all the mobility increasing all over the world and the energy consumption and so on. But anyway, let me start with you, Martin. Please give us a little introduction of what you actually kind of do over there and what's the situation after Katowice and ahead of the next ones coming up.
Well, thank you very much and a very good morning to you. In the program, I have seen that I should be talking about the Katowice roadmap. There is no Katowice roadmap.
That's the point.
And that's very good news because we had decades of roadmaps and plan and action plans. Now we have Paris. The organization for which I work has the name of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That sounds difficult and cumbersome, but what it says is a framework convention was established in 1992 to come up what we came up with finally in Paris, a globally binding instrument on climate change. This one is standing, and for me, the biggest outcome of Katowice is actually that we are still able to have multilateral diplomacy, that we are still able, as the world community, to come to solutions, even with some populist governments, international organizations, and international cooperation works. So what did we do in Katowice? We were basically defining the small print of the Paris Agreement. And I need to reiterate that the Paris Agreement is a starting point of a global regime that will be with us for many, many years. And it's basically a framework in which countries can bring in their own national determined contributions, another lingo word, that's the climate plans, that different governments are taking for themselves or collectively, as in the case of the European Union. And this is where the rubber hits the road. And I think this is what's interesting for all the startup people here in the room. You have an interest to be part of this national climate action plans. You have an interest to present solutions that are most certainly not on the radar of political decision makers, quite simply because they are new. And there's a tendency in political decision making that those in power take decisions on the basis what they take as normal and for granted. And people like you are in the room here understand that we are already light years away from the current system we have out there. And one of the biggest challenges I see is that with every decision, particularly on infrastructure and energy infrastructure, we risk to lock in a system that is not competitive, that is not good for the environment, that is not pointing towards the future. So what I would like to get out of this meeting is that your voice is being heard in political decision-making processes. I heard the example of Chile before and using blockchain for distributing renewable energy. That's exactly the kind of innovation we need. And Andreas, if I have one more minute, 30 seconds, I would like to appeal to you as human beings, not least, because let us never forget that all of the climate change issue is actually impacting most on the people who are contributing least. And I think there is a particular niche and a particular opportunity for business, but also just for being a good person, I think, which we aspire to make digital solutions available for the world poorest. Think GPS for smallholder farmers, think innovative irrigation system, decentralized solar power. These are things can make a world of difference for people who are suffering most. Thank you for these extra 30 seconds.
No, well, thank you very much. That was very good. Well, Annette, let's come to you. I mean, you're the co-chair of the C3E, Energy Education and Empowerment Initiative. Education, empowerment. Well, tell us a little bit about what you're doing there and how important that is in the age of fake news and all that things.
Yeah. I'd love to. So the Clean Energy Education and Empowerment Initiative, also affectionately known as C3E, is an initiative, a global initiative to advance the participation of women in the clean energy sector. And that's really critical because I think something we don't always realize and a linkage we don't always make is between the importance between gender equality and fighting action on climate change. Really, there's an inextricable link, and unfortunately, the women are very much unrepresented in the clean energy and energy sector, and we need to change that because we need to bring all talents, all people, all solutions to bear to take action on climate change. And I think there's a lot of evidence that suggests that gender equality is really going to propel us forward.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a concrete example of a project you do, for example?
Yes, actually, just last year we launched a campaign called Equal by 30. It's an initiative to bring both public sector and private sector together to advance action on on gender equality in the clean energy sector. It asks signatories to endorse high-level principles around equal pay, equal leadership, and equal opportunity. And then it really compels those organizations to take action on gender equality. It's been enormously successful.
Okay.
I invite all companies, all governments to sign on and to take action.
Okay.
It's really making a difference.
Well, thank you much. It gives me the chance to share some good news because the amount of female founders of startups which applied for the SET award is much bigger than all the other years before. I mean, there's really something seems to be changing over there.
Yeah, we're at an inflection point, I think, when where I think globally we're really catching on to the idea that that gender equality is important and women have solutions to bring, and so I'm really excited by the new influx of women startups.
Okay, Jacqueline. You're Executive Vice President, Business Development of Hydro-Québec International. You're part of the Quebec Energy Association as well, so you kind of know the linkage between the economy and politics and regulations and all that things. What he told us, is that really helpful for the business you have to do? And what is your perspective on that issue, like there is no planet B? Tell us a bit about it.
Yeah, just first, thank you very much to having me here. I would like to take 30 seconds to jump in on Annette,
Sure.
because it's a reality. The problem is not to have a lot of women, it's to reach a different level. And in energy, only 2% of the women can reach a position as a director or VP or more. So it's not a glass ceiling, it's a marble ceiling. So it's extremely difficult. So we need to be more open on that. To jump in on the climate, I would like to start with some facts. I live in Canada, so I live in Canada. For me, also it's difficult because I'm an immigrant in Canada. So we already reached 1.7 more on degrees from the last report this month. So we are in a very critical situation if we compare with the rest of the world that they raise 1%, 1 degree more. The problem is not what's going to happen, yes, with the water or with it's going to be more hot, is the unpredictable climate and unpredictable winters, and we are living that. So this winter in Canada was horrible. And the problem is not because it's more cold or hot, it's because we are not going to have 4 seasons, but more than 100 seasons. So that means that every 2 or 3 days, we are going to change, and we're going to pass from -30 to 10 degrees centigrade. This is going to help the country to eliminate the planet, or not the planet, but the people. because the impact on animals is going to be critical. They cannot adapt themselves to move from summer to winter every week. Because the problem is more related to that, linked to the level of water that is going to help, by 2050, we can reach 25 or 75 centimeters of water increasing. So this is the level going to impact all the business, not only the energy one. In Hydro-Québec, in Quebec, we are lucky because we produce energy by 90.9% based on waters, which is hydro, but can affect also because the water, with the level of water, you're going to have too much. So the more we are able to move to different sources in order to have the balance, it's going to be better for the world. By 2050, we're going to have more plastic than fish on the oceans. This is not logic. So I think the business, every business, even not only energy, every business is going to be impacted. Energy one is going to be more.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, talking about business, I mean, how is the business in the renewable sector? I mean, you're basically working on hydro, but how is it going? I mean, do you really feel that there is an intensive growing interest in what you're doing and what other companies are doing?
Hydro is always very interesting. The problem in the world is going to be the high cost for construction and acceptability, social acceptability, which is extremely important. So we need to be take care of where we have to implement that. And I always say that hydro is like a liquid battery. So this helps a lot to have the stability for solar and for eolics. Because without hydro, solar is great, but you can drop by 90% with only one little change on the climate. Okay, right. So it's very unstable. So we really need this stability.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let's get back to Danny. Danny Kennedy, Managing Director, California Clean Energy Fund, and much more. One thing, which is one of these things more, is I don't know how we met, but years ago when we started the SET Award, we didn't know each other before, but since then we had some very good meetings and talks, and also our teams are working very good together. It's a very good example of creating networks, and I'm very happy that you're here. So give us your view on the topic today.
Well, there is no planet B, and we're all telling stories from where we come from.
Right.
The Californian experience of late, for those of you that haven't seen the news, has been a disaster of, nightmarish proportions. My children were literally not able to go to school for a week last year because the smoke in the sky in San Francisco, which is, the wealthiest community in the wealthiest country on earth, was so bad because of forest fires that were caused by climate and an unreliable electricity system. I mean, the amazing confluence we're seeing in our marketplace around the old school way of doing electricity and its failure, like its catastrophic failure. We killed 87 people in a town we burnt down with a wire that fell out of an old transmission tower. That happened just 6 months ago and led to the largest fire in the history of the state. So we're living through this right now, and very much motivated by it. I should say, to the topic of the day or the panel, I'm embarrassed to be sitting here as the only American on stage because our president, tried to pull us out of Paris. Not that he really can, and we'll probably get away with it, but we're the only nation on the record currently not being part of that plan. Theoretically, although we, California, and many other states and cities across the country are still in, as we say, and therefore we are going to effectively meet the Paris targets as a nation. Certainly in California, we're going to meet them and beat them. We passed a law last year to respond to some of this crisis to go to 100% renewable in the entire electricity grid, but also, and not a lot of people understand this, we also have committed to decarbonize all sectors of the economy by 2045. So we're ahead of the Paris targets on time, and we intend to not only go 100% renewable, but to take out all carbon from the building sector, the transport, the industry, and all the rest. And this is in the 5th largest economy in the world. Germany, China, Japan, and the rest of the US are the only larger economies than our state. We're bigger than Britain, we're bigger than everyone. And we're planning and we have the path, and it's all about startups like the folk that are here that are going to get us the rest of the way. We know where we're going, but we need some innovation and we need lots of new technologies to get there. So that's what we're after.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was around the Climate Action Summit in California when California government introduced that 100% targets. How were the reactions in the other states in the US, and what did you hear?
It's contagious. People realize, and I would offer this as a recommendation for anyone anywhere, set your stretch goal. You know, the politician that passed the legislation for 100% renewables, a man called Kevin DeLeon, I think he will go down in history. That bill is the single biggest act of climate solutions in the history of the United States, certainly and probably the world. And he had to run 2 years of legislation to get it through. He would go around the state talking about it, and people were like, be reasonable, do 80%, do 90%. And he said, JFK didn't say we would go 90% of the way to the moon. He said, we went all the way to the moon and back. And that we do hard things in California. We needed to develop the World Wide Web. We did that. You know, we needed to grow the nation's agriculture in a desert. We do that. And likewise, we're now going 100%, no question. And to your question, Andreas, the rest of the country is catching on. 13 governors in the November elections last year ran on 100% platforms. Really? 9 of them were elected. One of them, just one example for the conversation today, is Colorado. Not really even a blue state, you know, a purple state at best, and not really that progressive. Their new governor is radically financing the phase out of 5 coal plants left in the state, building wind and solar farms with bonds they're issuing, doing a just transition training program to retrain the workers to go from the coal plants to the wind and solar and the storage, and paying for it all on public debt, which will be paid back on the savings by going renewable. To Siemens Gamesa's point, that it's cheaper now in the United States to build a solar farm or a wind farm than to run an operating coal plant. So anyway, we've caught on like wildfire across the country. A lot of the country will be 100% before you know it.
All right. Well, let's go back to Canada then, maybe just for a moment, if I may. Well, I know they have a very active government. I also know that you have tough discussions in some areas where you are leaving out of coal and things like that. So can you give us a little insight of the discussions you have in the Canadian society about climate change? I mean, it's the structural change accompanying this. I mean, how is it going?
Yeah, so last month we got our last report for the GIEC, and the people are a little bit worried about, because we're not talking what's going to happen. It's now happening in Canada. This is the point, and everybody talk about that. We got, I told you, a horrible winter. The people just have a scar here because I dropped first time in my life. I can move my hand for a month. Because this, on the icy, I got all my entry icy by at least 15 centimeters, and everybody got the same. So it's a reality that we reach this point that we cannot come back. So this is going to be an example for the world, but the people need to know what's going to happen. And what's happening now in Canada, it's not only about the water. We talk about animals, farmers are completely affected. We normally have at this time of the year the maple activities because it's very maple, and we cannot start. Normally we start 2 months ago because it's so icy that the trees are affected. So we have everything.
But does everybody in Canada understand that?
I think we are very. Oh yeah,
my point
is yes. I think the people now understand.
No, that's very good. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very good because I'm asking that because I know that there are some discussions in some areas, of course, tough discussions. We can all solve them, but how can empowerment and education help us here to, really prepare for this structural change? I think the one thing is we all know the planet is on crisis, and we do have the biggest transformation ahead of us. Which we all can probably remember, and that will of course change the environment, the business environment, the working place environment of so many people. Is that an issue you are dealing with, and what do you think? You have some advice for us, what we can do here with structural change?
Well, I mean, I think like I was saying before, inclusiveness, gender equality, thinking about these things is really going to propel us forward. There is an inextricable link between gender equality and fighting climate change. If you switch over to the energy sector, and that's where I concentrate. I also come wearing two hats. I work for the federal government for Canada. I live in Canada, so I have something to say about that as well. But if we leap over to the energy sector, we need more ideas. And when you bring more ideas to the table, when you have better diversity, you really are going to innovate more. And that's the key. That's critical. That is what we need. We need to innovate more to get us that full way, which Danny was just mentioning, to get us all the way there.
Only one important point is, the problem that we have now in Canada is not only because of Canada, because we have all the movement on the water from all the people who have polluted, for example, in Southeast Asia, going to impact the rest of the world. So we have like zero tolerance for bags, plastic bag on the supermarket is none. That we move to the other side in US and you have plastic bag everywhere. Now it's impact us because everybody going to carry your bags for the supermarket, even for the kids. And a lot of enterprise, no bottles for water. So I think we try to do, we need to do more.
Okay, so we know technologies are there. You can give the mic to him. The technologies are there. Politics is sometimes complicated. You said, well, nobody wanted to have just a 90% journey to the moon. Are we radical enough? Is the COP process radical enough?
Well, again, the COP process at this point is actually quite finished. Whatever you need as a regulatory framework is out there. The UN is a representation of sovereign states and can always and only go so far as the sovereign states go. But what we have just heard from Canada and from California is, unlike 10 years ago, we feel the impacts every single day. And even people who had question marks, because it is extremely hard to communicate a future problem, no matter how massive it is. They're turning around and they understand it. And the people who understand it best are our school children. And they are out there on the street every Friday and they're demonstrating for the climate and they are absolutely spot on. And so I see also what we needed for such a long time is becoming a reality now, that political decision makers understand people are on the street. And these people on the street, they will be at the ballot boxes in 2 to 3 years. But they have parents and they have grandparents and they care about their children and grandchildren. So I have really hoped that this is now changing politically the tide. And what needs to be done is massive. It's a massive effort because as long as it took to heat up an enormous system like the Earth, it will also take time and enormous investments to undo it, to actually extract carbon out of the atmosphere. And that's the big topic. It's not only limiting, we are way past the point of limiting. We have to undo the damage. And that, I think, can be done sometimes maybe with technology, but for sure with massive land restoration and with investments in natural systems. And if you think about it, that's a very exciting time because finally maybe we understand how valuable these systems are for us and we are prepared to spend money for that, and that is exactly where innovation and young people have their chance.
Danny, let me ask you something, because I know from some discussions that some are saying, well, technologies are there, it's all about innovation, that's it. Others say, well, that's foolish, it's all about politics. So what is your opinion on that? I mean, are we ready enough so that we can say, well, never mind how long it takes the politicians to find the right regulations and stuff like that, we just keep on going with our innovation, or is it something else? You said something to me right at the beginning of that meeting.
You know, it's definitely a chicken and an egg conversation. But I think what we've experienced in California is the liberating opportunity of seeing this as a business space and getting into it and creating jobs and wealth and leadership, you know, notoriety and reputation as a clean energy champion, and that creates political will, and it's sort of a virtuous spiral. You know, like the incubators we build around the world through the New Energy Nexus now, wherever we go, you see, 5 or 6 companies with, 2 people on each staff and 5 customers, and before you know it, a politician's turning up for a photo opportunity, and they want to be filmed with the kids with the cool ideas and the drones and the blockchain stuff and whatever. And, in Indonesia and the Philippines, we've actually changed markets by entrepreneurial insight while, huge incumbents are still proposing bad things. So I think, it's both and. We have to have politics set the markets and the regulations, and we have to support an entrepreneurial state to not just crowd in and crowd out bad actors, but to dynamize the market. That's part of our work and democracy. And then we also have to address the markets with innovation and entrepreneurship and financial strategies that are going to unleash the market and enterprise. And climate change to me is a failure of both states and markets. And we have to support the solutions actors on both sides of that.
Well, that's actually one of the ideas we have with the SET project, to bring together innovation with all the people who are on the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue Conference today. That's why we have a winners panel tomorrow on that conference. I think politicians do have to see what kind of innovation is available already, and that is not so easy. I mean, the question of innovation, I remember like 5, 6, 7 years ago, not so many people were talking about innovation when they were talking about climate change politics. They were just talking about wind and solar, okay. But I mean, did that change? I mean, are people more aware of all the potential we have already?
I think absolutely yes, this is happening. Bear in mind that our conferences of the parties, Katowice, Bonn, Marrakesh, and so on, they're enormous gatherings with 25 to 40,000 people. Maybe 2,000 or 3,000 of them are negotiators. Everybody else is out and about climate solutions, presenting opportunities. It's a massive fair also of opportunities. I think the nuance that I'm seeing these days, and it's a good one, is that people understand it's all about integration. It's not this isolated idea here. It's about closing circles. And if you look at nature, nature constantly recycles. Nothing gets lost. We are sitting here in front of a massive flat screen that radiates heat. What's happening with this heat?
Not much.
It's just disappearing somewhere. But there is an opportunity here to use the energy of this heat and to recycle that. If you look at big industries, they are understanding that every excess heat, every trash that they are causing might be the commodity that somebody else can work with. Heat, cold, excess of that, too little of that. So connecting things that are seemingly independent, like transport systems and energy, well, that's an easy one. But food systems and energy for agriculture, out of post-harvest losses turned into biodiesel, is not a bad thing, even if it's carbon energy, but it's cycled carbon energy. It's not fossil. It's basically out of the organic system.
So what you're saying is, and I think that's a very good news, that all these innovations and the better understanding of the energy systems is really doing a change also for the political debate. And so here we can see how both of it really interacts, and I think that is very good news, because I have to look at the time. We have to pass on the mic to her again, Annette. Well, I mean, hearing about innovation, politicians and politics and all these things, but what would you say is like one of the most important actions we should take from your perspective, from the job you're doing and your experience? Is there anything you would really wish that that should be more on the agenda, or where we should focus more on?
Well, I think you know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, kind of.
That you can take action on gender equality, and it can make a difference for our energy transition, for action on climate change. And you know, our initiative is really working to get that word out. But governments can take action. You know, the Canadian government has really realized that we need to put this at the forefront of our agenda when we're talking about climate action. We also need to be looking at women and girls who are the most impacted by climate change globally, but also can bring solutions to the table. You know, I think businesses have a role to play. It's good for their bottom line, but it's also really the right thing to do. And I think no action is too small in this area, and I'd really compel everyone to do something about it.
Well, I know that I spoke about drawdown before, and I know that gender equality is one of the top issues indeed when it comes to fighting climate change.
It is, and it's actually in the top 20 solutions that it can have a real impact on reducing emissions. Education of women and girls, there is an effect, there is an impact.
From your perspective, is there anything like a top thing which is still missing, what should be more on the agenda regarding politics? Or?
To be honest, what we are doing today is exactly what we have to do. I think we need to promote the ideas of our people. We have amazing young people with great ideas, but we need to take the responsibility to communicate and to say we have to do it together. I think communication, education is key. Education, different level. We already know what we have to do. We need to take the courage to do it. That's all. Let's do it. Stop the politics. I think we can manage and drive our lives. And together, because I saw yesterday for all the innovation, it is amazing. We have the tools. We need only to take the courage together and put it and go ahead.
It's very encouraging, Danny. I think that you would probably agree to that.
Yeah.
But I make it more difficult for you. You have to tell me what is like your number one or two really technology you think which is really coming up pretty soon, because you have a good overview.
No, I'm not going to go there, Andreas. The technology we need is democracy, actually. Right. I mean, like in America, we haven't innovated our democratic institutions for decades, centuries even, and that's why Donald Trump won an election when Hillary Clinton did by the numbers. And I'm sorry to get political for you all, but it's important to know that, and we would have a very different climate policy in the United States if we had implemented modern technology in the democratic machinery. But the point really is what you said, which is about uplifting all the voices, the majority of the public opinion in Europe and the United States and around the world, and all the examples of leadership that are coming out of places you least expect them. I mean, just two quick stories. One is we're seeing better innovation on the technology front from Senegal than Silicon Valley these days. You know, that was evident yesterday in the jury room. The amazing ideas coming out of leapfrog markets in Africa and Asia and elsewhere are really mind-blowing in how exciting they are. And also just political courage. We've just had a situation in America where the Navajo Nation, which is the poorest, the largest indigenous community, but the poorest people in the country, have just decided to get off coal. They've made a decision last week. They're moving away from coal, which is a huge impact on them economically, but they're doing it for all the right reasons. And so it's uplifting these voices and listening to these examples and showing them and communicating them as you are today.
All right. I think that's basically it, because the startups are waiting to make their pitches. Thank you very, very much. I think, well, before you give your round of applause, I think it was very good to see that innovation has an impact on politics. The other thing is we have to be more radical when it comes to politics. Time for bad compromises seem to be over, and the technologies are available. You are all here. Thank you very much for being with us today. Your applause. Geraldine, it's up to you.